Hello coders. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to one of the most important topic in Go programming, that is functions. From basic syntax to advanced features like multiple return values, name returns, and periodic parameters. Functions are what enable us to write clean and reusable code in any programming language. What you will be learning in this video is how to declare a function, how to call a function, what are function parameters or function arguments, what are its return values, where is it returned to, what is the structure of a function, what is a function signature, what is a function definition. You will see all this in this video. So let's get started. Let's create a file. We'll name it function.go. Go. As usual, we'll have our package main and function main. I've been writing this function from day one. So I think today I'll be covering what exactly the meaning of these keywords are, right? What does FUNC mean in this? What is the return value of the main function? All those things. Let's import the formatting library for printing. Now, a function is basically a block of code or a piece of code that is defined to do a specific task or job. It is a function nothing but a group of statements that is designed to do a particular task. A function takes an input, processes it, and gives you back an output. So to define a function in Go, the keyword uses func, func, and followed by the name of the function that you want to define. So in this case, function main is a predefined function that the Go compiler recognizes. Main is actually a predefined function name that is predefined in the compiler, which the compiler knows that my code is going to always start from main. Similarly, we can define our own user functions. For example, I can write a function called hello, right? And parentheses. Parentheses is for if your function expects any inputs, right? In that case, you can pass it inside the parentheses. Function hello, and this whatever comes inside the function block is your function body, also known as function definition. And the entire signature, I mean including the function name and its return type, is what is called as a function signature. Now maybe I'll write it in the comments. Function, and then we have the function name, then we have arguments which are optional. We can have multiple arguments, and then we have our return value, which is also optional and can return multiple values, right? Now, this is a function which does not take any input parameter or does not have any return type. So what we can do is probably do a fmt.println hello, since it's greeting. Now, let's say I want to use this function. To use a function, what you have to do is refer to it by its name with the parentheses. So to use the function, I can just type hello with the parentheses. That's how you call a function. This is your function call. This is your function definition, right? Now let's try and run the program. Yeah, you see hello is outputted. Now let's say you want to pass an argument to your function. Let's see how we can do that. We have function, let's say greet, and inside this I will define an argument or a parameter saying that I want a string variable. I'm expecting a string parameter from it, and I'm going to return a string value, right? Now in this case, what happens is the greet function is expecting an input from the caller. Your caller is anyone who is trying to call the greet function, and string is what it will return to your caller. So let's try it out. In this case, let's say this will return hi plus name. Now where is name coming from? I mentioned, right, the string, there will be a string argument that's coming in as a parameter to the greet function. We have to name this variable. This particular argument is nothing but a variable name string. So let's see, the output will be, we can collect the output like this by calling a function greet and then a name, let's say John, right? And we will try and print the output. Let's see what happens in this case. You see the output is printed as hi John. Now the output what we got from the greet function is hi, the string we have, plus the plus operator in case of string is used to combine strings. So we have hi plus whatever name we get as a function parameter in the function named greet. The return keyword is used to return the value from a function to its caller. So in our case, the caller is main function, right? And greet is referred to as the callee, the function which is being called. Caller is main and the callee is greet. And the arguments or the parameters are name and the return type is string, right? Because we are returning a string variable here. Anytime a function has a return type, the function is expected to always return. When the function does not have a return type, there is no necessity that it should have a return keyword. For example, our main function, if you see here, there is no return type associated in its function signature. That's the reason we don't write any return here. Now let's assume in a function you do a specific logic and you want to break out of the function in between, right? Similarly, we covered this in for loops where we wanted to return out of the loop. We used a break keyword. Similarly, to return out of the function, we used a return keyword. That's what return here is for. Now, it is not necessary that return keyword should have arguments passed to it. We can use return without any argument as well. For example, if I type return here, even without return, when a function does not have a signature with return type, it is by default consider that it is not returning anything. You can explicitly also mention that I am returning from the function using the return keyword. That is also perfectly valid. Let's try and run the function. As you see, there is no change in the output because this is also perfectly valid. In Go, we can also return multiple values. That is, let's say I want to write a function divide, which basically returns me the quotient and the remainder of a division operation. Now, a function divide, basically just like your divide operator, takes two operands, right? The dividend and the divisor. Now, for the ease of program, we'll take it as int and int. So this is basically your dividend, right? And your divisor. And it will return two things. One is the quotient and your remainder, right? Now, how do we calculate the quotient? Is just dividend by divisor and remainder will be your dividend modulus your divisor, right? And in the return statement, I'll be writing quotient and remainder. Now, to use this function, what we'll do is I'll just comment this out for clarity. Now, to collect the output, what I can do is we can have quotient, comma, remainder, colon equal to our divide function, which will take two parameters. For now, I'll take 7 and 3. In this, right, in this particular statement, we have two return values. That's the reason we are having two variables on the left side of colon equal to. We can always define or declare multiple variables in a single statement using the colon equal to operator. For example, if you want to define two variables x comma y, you can always define it like x comma y equal to 0 comma 0. It will take in the exact order as it is mentioned. In this particular statement, right, quotient and remainder are your return values that will be returned from your function towards your caller. Your dividend and divisor here are called as formal parameters, right? They are formally representing the value that will be passed on into this function later. That means they are basically placeholders for your function divide. The values that you pass in here in the actual function call are called actual parameters. So dividend and divisor are your formal parameters, and 7 comma 3 are your actual parameters. Now let's try and print the output, quotient and remainder. Oh, I use the wrong operator here. It is supposed to be modulus. Yeah, you see 2 and 1. 2 is your quotient and 1 is your remainder, right? Now let's assume in a function you don't want the second return value. You want to ignore it. Now I can obviously remove it from the print, but as I mentioned earlier, Go will complain that the variable is unused and you have to use it. But I don't want to use it. Now, in that case, there is an identifier in Go specifically for this purpose to ignore any unwanted return values or variables. That is called blank identifier, and it is represented using an underscore. So in this case, you will not get any error saying that it is unused. This value is basically ignored. So I'll run, see there are no complaints, and it outputs to the quotient after dividing 7 by 3. Now, just like the formal parameters, right? We have to name the parameters for them to be used in your function. Like if I write int, just int here, I will not know what is the parameter coming in. That's the reason you name the parameters in the function signature. There is also a provision in Go where you can name your return values. That is this set here, or maybe this particular string in the greet function. How to do that is what you can do is you can name it something like similar to the parameters quotient and remainder. Now let's try running this program. Now it has failed. It says no new variables on the left side of colon equal to, and it says twice. That is because we have defined that our return variables will be named quotient and remainder in the signature itself. And we are trying to define the variables again here. If you see colon equal to is used to declare and initialize. In that case, what we can do is you don't need to use the colon. You can directly assign the values like this. Now let's try running the program. You see it outputs 2 now. I can print it out, print the remainder as well so that it is more clear. Now we have the output for both quotient and remainder. If we are naming the return values, right, it is not necessary that you explicitly mention them in your return statement. Let's assume we don't mention what do you want to return here. What happens in this case is that since quotient and remainder are already defined as your return values, it will automatically be returned from your function. You don't need to explicitly return them. Let's try and execute this program. You see the values have been returned. Now let's see I don't calculate or assign these values, right? What happens? Even in that case, something is returned, even though it is invalid because we have not done any calculation. It is returning the default value of those variables. So each data type in Go has a default value. So for string, right, you can maybe write it down here. For string, the default value is empty string. For int, it is 0. For float also, it is 0 0.0. And then we have bool also, it is false. These are some values for the basic data types. For all data types, there will be always an empty value. That's the reason you're getting 0 as the output, even though you have not defined it in your function body or function definition. Right. So this is one of the handy function. It is used for more readability. In the case of documentations, your function signature itself will tell you what it's returning by naming the return values. So this was a brief introduction to functions in Go. If you have any comments, please let me know. On that note, this is Cron Coder signing off. See you in the next one.